All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We accidentally put the wrong tag on the front. I apologize for that. I appreciate those that were joining us for this Ag Exchange conversation this morning on protecting farms and farm workers navigating immigration enforcement. It is good to have those that are logging on. I am Ben Tyndall. I'm the executive director for Safe Family Farming. And we will be having a really good conversation with a couple of key experts in our region to talk about some of the challenges around immigration and farm labor and the workforce that agriculture is dealing with currently. Hopefully the goal of this will be mainly to not just be informative, but also to be a tool to provide you, whether you're a farm owner and operator or an employee on a farm, to know what your rights are, know what responsibilities you have, know what resources and tools are available to you. So know that that really is the goal. This is not just to be informative, but hopefully it will be empowering and give you some tools moving forward. So with that, I do want to recognize, though, before we really dive in, a couple quick things. One, want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor. Big thank you to Kennewick Irrigation District for their sponsorship of the Ag Exchange, their continued support for Safe Family Farming and the work we're doing, and they really help make these conversations possible. So really a big thank you to Kennewick Irrigation District for the work that they do in the Kennewick area and the support that they provide to agriculture, and as well as to organizations like Safe Family Farming. So really do thank them. I do want to introduce our guests, our participants in the conversation. We will be speaking with, one is Enrique Gastelum. He's the Chief Executive Officer over at WAFLA. Enrique is been a leading advocate for agriculture labor in Washington State, really and beyond, as in the greater Northwest area. He has been shaped by his farm worker family background and experience in labor law and government regulation, and as well as really taking on several key leadership roles in Washington agriculture over the past many years. And so really appreciate his perspective in this conversation, as well as Eamon Roche. He is an attorney with Roche and Bishop Law. Eamon is an experienced immigration attorney specializing in employment and family-based immigration law in the Pasco area, as well as had an extensive international background and experience and legal advocacy. He is committed to helping immigrant families and workers navigate complex legal challenges, and really appreciate his perspective and understanding in this very relevant and current issue. So with that, I do want to bring the two guests on to join. But as they come on, I do want to share with those that are watching and taking part to encourage those, if you are watching this on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, as we have this conversation, know that we welcome questions. So we'll be having a conversation. This will be a good dialogue going on, but I do want to encourage you, if you do have questions that come up, just type those into the comments in whatever platform you're watching this, be it on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. You can comment there. We'll be watching for those questions come in, and we can try to incorporate those into the conversation as we're able. So take part in that. And so we want to encourage you to utilize that facility. And guys, thank you both for coming on and sharing with us. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your your Thursday morning for this conversation. It really means a lot. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I do want to just kind of start maybe with a foundational question. Kind of give me a bit of an understanding. And again, just for context, I'll put some of these toward one of y'all, but know that this is a dialogue. So feel free to jump in and we'll just make this a conversation. But from your perspective over the last year or two, why is immigration such an important thing that farms and farm families are facing right now? Kind of give us a little bit of the kind of overarching, maybe 30,000-foot view of what are farms facing when it comes to immigration and to law and to labor law, I should say.
I guess I'll start. So thank you, Ben. My name is Eamon Roach, immigration attorney in Pasco, Washington. In my daily work, I talk to a lot of people who are here in the United States without status. Based on that, we're trying to figure out how to get them legal status. Mm-hmm. And based on the current climate, it's harder to do that, and more people are scared to file anything with the current administration and the current climate. So with that, a lot of people are here without status in Eastern Washington and elsewhere doing agriculture and other labor jobs. So based on that, the farmer, the agricultural person is looking for somebody to, help them or work. They're scared of being picked up by ICE or by immigration. So that's mostly what I'm seeing is, a general fear of, going to work and trying to do the job that they've been doing for years, and hope that there might be some change in the law, but ultimately a chilling effect based on the current administration and their actions, saying that they're going after the people that are here illegally or the worst of the worst, and then we're seeing them go after everybody, even if they do have zero criminal U.S. citizen spouses, kids, and otherwise qualify for legal status. Even they are afraid to do whatever they are typically allowed to do under the immigration law.
Yeah. Enrique, how about yourself? What are you seeing, from maybe the farm owner and operator side and the HR side?
Well, I think, for me, this has been something building for many, many decades, right? If you look at, our farming community, our farming industry, here in the state of Washington, we have a lot of labor-intensive agriculture that requires a lot of hands, not just year-round, but during, certain seasonal peaks. And, the predominant workforce is made up of people of a Mexican, a heritage, Central America, Latin America, right? And for a long time, up through the 80s and 90s, we had a pretty open border, right, of people migrating back and forth. There was, my grandparents were braceros that came up from the Mexico, Texas area in the 40s. My mom, was born down there, brought up. My dad immigrated in from Baja California. He came legally, but I have some relatives that came, illegally. And, over time, a lot of just families came to the United States because they were hungry, they're starving, couldn't find enough work where they were at, and, seeking a better life, right? And so we have for decades this community of workers and families that have migrated up, either stayed here or flowing back and forth, and overall supporting our farms, right? Where over the decades, our classic US-born citizen has not wanted to do farm work, right? It's hard work. You're out in the weather, you're out in the dirt, and over time, our society, just the people that are born here are not accustomed to doing that type of labor work anymore. And so we have a large community, majority of our workers, again, made up of that, Mexico, Latin American descent. And, there's not hard data, but some pretty good anecdotal, estimates that, maybe 50 on the West Coast of the United States for labor intensive agriculture, other industries, maybe 1 in 2 are not of legal status. But for the farmer employer, since the 80s, we've had this I-9 requirement where when you hire a worker, if they present you with documents that look legit, and you're not supposed to be a document expert, but they present you a social or a passport or some, green card that looks legit, they've been getting hired, right? Because we need workers, we need labor. And so now with this administration, as anyone was getting at, with this level of enforcement, which, we haven't seen for a very, very long time, it is starting to create this level of uncertainty and some fear, not just amongst the working community, but the owners and the managers of these operations saying, I think everybody's of legal status. They present, they've been working for us for 15 years, 20 years, 5 years. Stuff looks legit. The people that have been migrating seasonally from Mexico, from Texas, California to, work cherries or apples seem legit. But now it's got a lot of people very concerned of, okay, if somebody were to actually run this information through some federal database and really check it, what would that data look like, right? And again, there's no requirement to. There's also a lot of pressure on farm employers to not ask people about legal status and immigration status, because that can be a violation with the federal government. So employers are in this catch-22 of, well, I know I have to check that they're legal. They look legal on paper. They've been working for me, but I also can't really dive in and start questioning them unless I'm given legit information by the worker or somebody else that says they don't have legal status. And so for our labor intensive industry, this is creating a lot of, uncertainty amongst employers, workers, management, and our crops, right? Like we don't get to tell Mother Nature, hey, cherries aren't ready this week, right? We don't have workers. Hold up. We'll pick them in 2 months when we can get workers here. And so that's why, too, we've had a big reliance on the H-2A program, because you have a guaranteed workers, but that is a costly, bureaucratic, expensive program. And so not so much concern on the H-2A front from those type of people, but you still have this underlying domestic workforce that is here or has been migrating. And so, yeah, it definitely creates some uncertainty out there.
Yeah. So kind of both of y'all have hinted at that a little bit, but what does the heightened immigration enforcement, how has that impacted farm workers, farm worker families, the farm operation? Mentioned there's uncertainty, there's fear floating around. How is that impacting both the operation and, what are you seeing in rural communities? How is that, what are the kind of practical, tangible, felt on the ground effects of this increase of immigration enforcement that we're seeing?
I mean, specifically, it goes towards people not wanting to go to work. It's okay, I've seen ICE at this location or that location or the other location. I'm not going to work today. And based on that, all of a sudden the employer doesn't have a picker or a worker, or, the cow doesn't get milked or the cherry doesn't get picked. So that's number one thing. Number two would be, okay, somebody gets detained. So it's not just them sitting at home afraid to go out. It's, I get detained and then I'm not here anymore. So I'm not, supporting the rest of my family. I tell my employer, like, hey, I've been working for the last 15 years. I had presented the documentation that I needed to be able to work for you. But, I can't work for you anymore. And the detainment of people, typically it was, you would get detained and then you would go through the immigration process to potentially apply for cancellation of deportation or another benefit that you might be able to qualify for based on U.S. citizen kids, good moral character, long time here in the United States, or potentially marriage to a U.S. citizen, something like that. But the speed at which the ICE and the immigration courts are moving and sending people back to their home countries, a lot of times without the legal processes having been followed. Based on that, we're losing a lot of people that otherwise were here for decades and mostly waiting for a change in the law. So that's what I'm seeing every day is phone calls saying, hey, somebody got detained, they're in Tacoma, what are we supposed to do now?
Yeah.
That's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And then now you have a ripple effect, right? It's like you throw that rock in the lake and now it starts to ripple across. It just takes one or two people to get detained or picked up at a grocery store for now the word to start spreading amongst that workforce, amongst that company, in that community. And let's face it, a lot of our agricultural work is done in small rural communities, Mattawa, Washington, Eltopia, Mesa, Walla Walla. People all talk and they know, right? And then with the invent of social media and people online, things spread quickly, right? I remember, if we rewind a year ago right now, I don't know if you remember, Eamon, but there was it felt like daily there was these Facebook posts of, hey, ICE is at the Sunnyside, Fiesta Foods. It's, we saw it at the meat market, Carniceria in Pasco. We saw it in Wenatchee. And, are they out now? Is everybody going to get picked up? And, so it started kind of creating this. And again, I wouldn't say it's this across Washington, at least for the farming community. We've not, at least from our membership, not seen it just whole spread where it's like they're going farm to farm to farm. It's like this isolated thing, but then it creates this ripple effect of emotion and concern and fear that then can start spreading across the community, where it can feel like, oh, this just happened with this one work at this one farm, but now it feels like it happened everywhere in Mesa, right? Or everywhere in Royal City. So
agreed.
Yes.
We aren't really seeing the at least in my practice, I haven't really seen the ICE raids going to a location and grabbing everybody at a work site. It's been more individualized. We're grabbing this one person or this one person. But if we're grabbing this one person, who's around them, we're going to grab them also if we have a reason to or no reason to.
Absolutely.
So we haven't seen workplace raids per se, but we are seeing a lot more individualized detentions.
Yeah. And I mean, and that has a very practical, tangible, in some ways it could be devastating effects on a family. But talk to me about, for those who may be viewing this that aren't necessarily farmers, they're not engaged in agriculture directly, but this can have long-reaching effects on food production and food security for our state. Enrique, can you kind of maybe share a little bit about that perspective? How does this level of insecurity and instability, that has ripple effects like you shared?
Yeah, it's I call it kind of like the dog pile effect, right? When we were all kids, there was somebody on the ground and we saw him down and we all just kept jumping on him. And it feels like our agricultural industry, at least for the last decade, no commodity's been untouched, but especially the labor intensive ones where we've had multiple variables just piling on top of our industry, be it supply demand issues, be it labor costs on a wage front, be it the state, federal mandated benefits that have to be provided, be it concerns with water availability. Many farms are on the brink, right? You guys at Safe Family Farming produced a wonderful video about, say, farms on the brink. And, we keep hearing that echoing more and more and more with our industry being, 500 million in the red in 2024 on cash, right? So it's like, the industry is bleeding money. There is no money available. So you have farms shutting down, farm consolidation. This type of fear for an employer that, even the biggest companies used to have 5-year, 10-year plans, right? They're looking down the road. They're just wondering, are we going to be open in the next year or two, right? And it could just take one incident of labor not being there to produce that one crop so they could keep the doors open and send their vegetables or fruit to the packing or processing facility that shuts them down forever, right? We're not talking about shutting down for the season. This is shutting down forever. And so those that are in the public that have been hearing the stories of farms on the brink, it is a legit thing, right? And, I grew up, my dad was a farm worker for 30 years, worked for a wonderful company. Just because these farms have land and equipment and all that, I tell people they're not necessarily rich. They are just rich in debt, and they've had a friendly banker up to this point. But right now the banks are feeling the stress where they need payments back. And so there is, just because somebody's sitting on 500 acres, 600 acres and tractors, and they owe on all of that, or they're upside down and they're in the hole, right? They're and they haven't been able to climb out of it. And so having a immediate short-term unavailability of labor to keep the operation moving along, a key tractor driver or a manager that gets detained, right, that has been helping to manage the farm for years, could just be devastating and the final nail in the coffin to shut that farm down.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we've also seen, and I guess I do want to reiterate as well, is a lot of times, it's those medium-sized to smaller farms are the ones that are the most vulnerable. They don't have, like you're saying, they don't have that margin. Even the large farms are not necessarily they're not necessarily rich. They're rich in debt, but they don't have those medium to smaller farms. They don't have that margin to, give. Yeah, if I have an employee who gets detained and I don't have that tractor running, that's a hit. If I don't have, this acre harvested, that's a hit to our production. And so you're absolutely right that farming on the brink mentality is very real. It's not just a cliche. But one of the things, as we've been putting this information out, we've gotten some, I guess, feedback or maybe even pushback from individuals who are commenting on some of the articles that we're putting out. Really, we're seeing there is a lot of misunderstanding. Frankly, you don't know what you don't know, and there's no shame in that. But for an individual who isn't a farmer, who is, someone kind of from the outside looking in, there is this tendency to have somewhat of a maybe antiquated understanding about hiring and employment in agriculture. That the farmer's just driving down the street looking for, people on the side of the road. Hey, jump in the back of my pickup. Let's go do some, you can go pick some apples on my farm, and I'll pay you under the table. That's not the reality at all when it comes to agricultural employment nowadays. There's actually a very heavily regulated, but actually a very sophisticated HR side to agriculture. That caricature may have been, true in some cases 100 years ago, but we are far removed from that today. Can you kind of walk me through a little bit, Enrique, I'll point the question to you, and Eamon, please jump in, but talk me through a little bit. What does the hiring process and the employment process on a farm look like, the HR side of agriculture look like, and what are the requirements that farmers have to go through and they have to abide by when they're facing and looking at hiring someone?
Now, I don't remember all the documents available. There's a list A and a list B, but like I said, back in the 80s with the Immigration Reform Act, they created this requirement for all employers in the United States to use what's called an I-9 form, right? Basically, it's once you decide that you're going to make somebody a job offer and hire them, you have so many days to verify, do they have legal status to work here in the United States, right? So either are they a U.S. born citizen, or are they here on some type of a work visa that allows them to be here and work in the United States? And so within 72 hours of the time you decide to start employing that person, there's a federal mandate, very strict as well, very costly if you don't follow these practices. I mean, the civil violations issued by Homeland Security for I-9 audits, I'm sure Eamon's heard some of them. But we're not talking chump change here. These are hundreds of thousands of dollars of civil penalties that the federal government has been known to issue against employers, and even some in farms where they've not had good I-9 practice. So it's a form that's filled out by the worker where they're attesting to, hey, here's my name, here's my address, here's, and the worker gets to pick, right? The employer doesn't get to tell the worker what documents you're going to show me. The employee, based on a list, gets to show it could be a Washington driver's license, it could be their passport, it could be an issued permanent resident card, could be a work visa, like for an H-2A worker. Whatever that worker presents to you, you look at that document, and there's certain fields you're looking at. Does it look legit? Is it a black and white copy? Is there like Sharpie on it, highlight? Is it like a paper copy inside of like a laminated piece, right? Like, you have to be able to say, does this look like something that wasn't just copied off a printer and given to this person, but it's a legit government issued ID or whatnot? And so the employer is required to go through that. They sign off on that form that they're testing, that they reviewed it, it looks legit, and they go through that. And then they're having them fill out their W-4 for taxes and whatnot, but to check on immigration status and or if they're a U.S. citizen or have legal, they're required to go through that practice. And that has been lots of education and training. I know we at WAFLA do that frequently, training people on how to look at an I-9 and what to look at on documents. And, Homeland Security, USCIS has gone out to lengths, putting out very lengthy, employer guides as to how to fill out an I-9 and how to audit it and how to check it. And because they want to say, look, we gave you all the resources, so when we do come and cite you, you can't argue and say you didn't know. So so that is something, major violations for employers if they don't do these I-9s and they get caught. I mean, these are some penalties that could shut businesses down, how big they are. Eamon, anything else you want to add on that?
I mean, it sounds easy to, just fill out the I-9 form. The I-9 form is a 4-page form with like an 18-page instructions with like a 400-page manual. So, this easy form to fill out, the employer says, hey, we've got somebody who's interested in working, and the employer has to take whatever the potential employee gives them. Obviously, they're not required to be a documents expert, so they're looking at these things, and it could be as little as a Washington State driver's license that anybody can get that lives in Washington State, and a Social Security card. Everybody knows what their Social Security card looks like. It's a flimsy piece of blue paper. So that could be enough to where you're saying, okay, well, this Washington ID is legit, looks exactly like the one in my pocket. And this Social Security card looks good because it's a piece of blue paper, just like mine. So you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, well, fill out the form and get to work, please. So, that's as simple as it could be hypothetically for, somebody to hire somebody not knowing that they don't actually have status. And then you can go through all the other types of documentation, and it gets even more complicated for expiration dates, receipt notices, and it gets really complicated really fast.
Right. But like even our Washington driver's license, right? So if I'm going to play devil's advocate, somebody probably, well, it's a government ID, right? Like, why don't they should have legal status? But we're in the state of Washington, Eamon. What does immigration status have to do with you being able to get a Washington driver's license in the state of Washington?
Exactly. Nothing.
Right. So it's not checked, right? It's not checked at all. And so, there's this general perception by the public, like, well, you should have known if these people were legal or didn't have status or whatnot. It's like, well, I looked at, and again, it's just a paper, cardboardish, like Social Security thing. Pretty easy to reproduce those things, with the sophistication out here with printers now. And so, again, somebody looking at that looks legit, right?
Yeah. Well, you're tapping into an important question that we've seen online in particular when we're sharing some of these stories about immigration enforcement. We had a farmer that we highlighted a few weeks ago, a month ago maybe, on a story where he had some of his employees that were being detained. And a lot of the pushback that we got, or some of the comments, were things like, really lacking, understanding maybe, or you could even argue empathy for the situation, but really the solution, don't hire illegal immigrants. And really this lack of, I'm sorry, they were here illegally. So, in their perspective, hey, we just need to arrest them all. And if you're hiring an illegal, if you're hiring someone who is here illegally, if you're hiring someone who's undocumented, well, you're a criminal just as long as they are. And some of these kind of very extreme rhetorical statements, how do you answer some of those critiques where really this lack of understanding or pity for a farmer who's seeing an employee being detained because, well, they shouldn't have hired someone who's undocumented, that's their fault, and they should be punished right along with the worker?
Well, here's the one quick one, and Amy can chime in here, but here's the quick and dirty, Ben. If I want to hire you and I'm considering you, before I offer you a job, I cannot ask you about your immigration status. I can't ask you if you're a U.S. citizen. I can't ask you, are you legal to work here? I can't ask you any of that. I could face both state and I believe federal severe penalties for violations of, immigration rights, human rights. And so, Eamon, anything you want to add to that? I think there's some statutes of you can't ask any of that stuff.
Exactly. No discrimination based on race, sex, or national origin. So that's not anything that you can actually ask. It's, are you willing to work? Are you ready to work? Do you have the skills that I require for the job? And if so, okay. Probably the other response to that is that the immigration system is so broken that somebody, oh, you came here illegally and just do it right. I have clients who filed their applications to do it right back in 2001 when there was an exception to the law. And they've been waiting for their green card since 2001. So I literally just got a guy his green card 2 weeks ago that has been here since 1980. An application was filed on his behalf in 2001 and he just got his green card.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this idea that just come here and do it legally, he did do it legally. And based on him filing before 2001, that gave him the exception to be here illegally until he could legalize. And
Yes.
guess what? He paid $1,000 fine because that was the fine back in 2001. And then he got his green card. So
Mhm.
this idea that just do it legally or, just do it the right way. This guy has been waiting 25 years and he finally got his green card doing it how he was supposed to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the laws continue to change and things continue to be more and more difficult to get legal status, but nothing changes in that regard as far as the law.
Yeah.
So with the law being as it is, we don't really have the ability to, have a comprehensive immigration reform unless there's agreement. So we have enforcement right now, really, really heavy enforcement that might end up putting our farmers out of jobs based on them not being able to get employees.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully what Enrique is doing with the H-2A helps, but not everybody can afford to do the H-2A program. So then there's other employees that are here that are working, that are filling in those gaps for those other farms that, they don't know what their status is.
Right.
But, the danger is they lose them, they lose the farm, and then all this farming goes to Mexico or goes to Peru or goes to China. So that's what we're scared of.
Yeah. Well, I love that you touched on that. Help kind of walk us through what are, some of, maybe help us understand the immigration system or situation. What are some of the reasons or the catalysts for individuals to come to the United States and do this illegally? It's not necessary. Yes, it could be someone, crossing the border, wading through the river, between the Mexico and the United States, of course, but that's not necessary. It sounds like that's probably not even the majority of individuals who are sneaking into this country. It's a lot more administrative and logistic reasons. It's a broad swath of reasons why someone may not have their paperwork in order.
Yeah, if we want to go really far back, we can say that the border jumped them. Half of America, the bottom half, used to be Mexico. We took it from them. Okay, so a bunch of what were Mexicans are now U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And then we also look at, the laws that have changed over the years. Bracero program doing the United States a favor by coming up and working when all the men were off in war. So, after that, it was, okay, we still have all these jobs and all this work. Somebody please come and fill them. Ultimately, it's sorted down to these migrant workers that were coming up and doing these migratory paths. Eventually, that kind of stopped and people got settled once 2001 happened. September 11th, 2001, that's kind of the, before and after. Before that, the border wasn't really, that guarded. Based on that, people would come and go and they would come up, work seasonally, and then they would go back to Mexico, back to where they lived. You close the border, so everybody just came up again, and then they just didn't leave. It was like, well, if you're going to close the border, why don't you fix all these people that are coming up and down, every season? Nope, we're not going to do anything there. So we missed an opportunity there to legalize these people that were otherwise trying to follow the law, coming up, working, and going back to their home country. when they were no longer allowed to do that, the economic reasons just allowed them to, made their decision for them. I'm going to stay here. And so a lot of these people, that same fake social security number that they're using to work and that driver's license that they're using to drive to work, because Washington State, their policy is, well, if you're going to be here working, you should probably be driving legally and otherwise trying to follow all the state laws, because the federal law, we don't agree with it. So with that, that's kind of the history of how things have happened. There's been no real comprehensive immigration reform. People have stayed here, they work, they earn, a paycheck, but they don't get any benefits back. So based on that, that's a huge conversation that I don't know is a discussion for today. We could speak for hours on that. But we'll see how it goes. Enrique?
Yeah, I say kind of with that story too, that's, post the 9/11, 2001, that's also then when Washington, being one of the most farthest northern states from the border, farmers started saying like, wait a minute, my seasonal workers aren't migrating anymore like they used to. Now they start looking at the H-2A program in the early 2000s, and really in Washington, I would say 07, 08, 09 is really when we started getting, 10, 20, 30, 40 employers starting to look at the program, because they're like, look, I can't do this anymore without my seasonal labor. And, let's face it, right? I tell people, why, not only why we need this immigration reform, but they're like, well, why do we need all these people here and why do we need all these workers? One, I grew up in the community, right? My dad was a farm worker. I'm living the American dream. I'm not doing that work anymore, right? Your normal US born citizen is not enticed. We have created child labor laws. Nobody wants to go out and do this work anymore. I hear all the time too, we'll just raise the wages and just do this and that. H-2A employers, I hear all the time, are trying to incentivize and keep as many domestic US workers as they can because it's cheaper. It's way cheaper than the H-2A program. But, there's a study that was done in California with sheep herders where from 1 year to the next, the state of California doubled the mandated wage that had to be paid to sheep herders. I think, I don't have the exact number, but let's say it went from like $38,000 to $60-some thousand for sheep herders. And the politicians were like, yep, that's what it's going to take to get U.S. workers to go out there. And zero went out and wanting to do sheep herding, even though the wage doubled overnight. And so this misconception by the public that farmers should just pay more or this and that. One, there is no money to pay more. Okay. Two, we also, as consumers of food, want food that we can afford in the grocery store, which everybody's complaining right now that food prices are getting too expensive. And quite frankly, too, as food prices go up, farmers are the last to see any of that money, if at all. It's the middleman, it's the grocery stores, it's the whoever. And so we also have people that are starving in other countries. And, to me, there's no foreign aid program better than the H-2A program where we allow workers to legally come, make a living, and take that money back home. Most of the people that have come up, and, Eamon could probably speak to this too, the ones that were migrating, they didn't want to stay and live in the United States.
Exactly.
Their goal was to take that money back home and build a life and retire back in Mexico or Central America. And when we shut the border down, we stopped that migratory flow, right? And so we do need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need our elected officials in Washington, D.C. to get off their rear. I mean, I can't believe we're still talking about this here in the 80s. The last time we did anything was the 80s, right? And we know this is a problem. And I'm one for, U.S. security. We need to know who's here, right? I'm wholeheartedly, my family, my wife is in law enforcement, right? I'm all for following the laws, but the other reality is the people Eamon and I are talking about that are here, the one legal thing we're talking is they're here without legal status. But if we really looked at their life that they have spent here, they have actually been living and working and contributing like we would hope a U.S. born citizen would be. They're working, they are in our communities, they're going to church, their kids are in school, they're contributing, they're staying out of trouble, they're donating to causes. they're actually doing what we would hope a U.S. born citizen would be doing. So what is this big push to round them up and kick them out, right? Like, we can have comprehensive immigration reform that lets people come out of the shadows, but also has the morality of, okay, they're actually the type of people that we want the United States built on. And let's rewind back to 1776 when our country was created. We were built on immigrants.
Right. Yeah.
We were built on immigrants.
Yeah.
But we have this polarizing conversation around immigration reform and not wanting to take care of the people that were here. Well, that's the root of what our country was built upon.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we can't get our act together as a nation and get this figured out.
Well, I really appreciate, honestly, that helpful perspective. That one, that this is, it makes we're going after the worst of the worst kind of fall a little flat. That the people that are being impacted generally seems that we're seeing locally. Like you're saying, the farm workers these are the individuals that you want in your community. These are the immigrants that are doing the job. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I really appreciate you sharing that perspective. I'd like to kind of shift us a little bit. One, what are to kind of maybe more practical or tangible things that individuals can kind of learn or take away from? I'd like to, let's start with the farm worker, the farm laborer. Eamon, what exactly, maybe back up, what are the rights, or what rights does an immigrant have when it comes to, if they are faced with, being detained, if they are fearful for their security or their family's security here in Washington? What are their rights, both as a documented individual, but an undocumented individual also has some rights to due process, et cetera. Kind of walk us through that. What security can maybe you give?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, anybody that is physically inside of the United States, the Constitution applies to them. So go through the Constitution, go through the Bill of Rights, go through the 10 Amendments, the first 10 Amendments, and, start with that. So Fifth Amendment. So if somebody gets detained, if you're a U.S. citizen or if you're here without status, you have your Fifth Amendment right, right to remain silent, due process of law. Somebody tells you, sign this or answer this, there's no requirement to do that, regardless of if you have status or not. Your Fourth Amendment right, your right against unreasonable searches and seizures. They shouldn't be able to just bust down your door and run inside of your house for no reason. So based on that, that's the discussion about warrants and where ICE or other officers can go. If a police officer just showed up to your house and kicked the door down, obviously that's a violation of your Fourth Amendment right. Same with an ICE agent just kicking down a door, thinking that they see somebody, that's Hispanic. Obviously, there's people from every single country in the world in the United States, and they're here legally and illegally. So this saying, oh, okay, they're Hispanic, we're definitely going to grab them. That's also not legal. That's classifying somebody based on their heritage. Sixth Amendment right, there's right to legal counsel. If somebody is detained, they can get an attorney. However, they don't have a right under the Constitution to have a free attorney. They can pay for their own immigration attorney. Immigration is considered to be a civil matter typically. And so based on that, they are not allowed to be provided with a free attorney. So they have to provide their own. When somebody is walking around on the street, obviously they're in a public place. They have just as much of an expectation as anybody else to be left alone. If you are detained or if you are asked questions, there's no requirement that somebody says something. ICE agent, hey, where were you born? There's no requirement that you answer that. But if you do answer that, you essentially, I was born in Mexico. You can be born in Mexico and still be a U.S. citizen. However, you say you're born in Mexico, the assumption is going to be, hey, this person probably doesn't have status, and we're going to start the deportation process. So, most people that I have come into contact with that are in the deportation process, typically the ICE officer asked them a question and they responded to it when there was no requirement for them to do that. And so that's, disheartening. Or they, had their, Mexican passport on them. Oh, why do you have this Mexican passport? That's pretty good evidence that you're a Mexican citizen. So why would you have your Mexican passport on you if that's not something that you're required to have on you? So, those kind of ideas with the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment are probably the best, discussion of rights that anybody and everybody has. And if you are detained, you can get an attorney. You have to pay for it yourself.
Okay. What are some steps or tools perhaps that a farm employer can put in place to protect their workers? Enrique, I'll start with you, but Eamon, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, that goes along with, and I'll start with, and I'll keep Eamon on here too, because we're talking constitutional rights, but the employer also has some right to unlawful search and seizure. These are private businesses. It's not some public park or, public place. So let's assume we're talking about a workplace, right, where a federal agent, an ICE agent crosses that threshold to be able to, they have some type of a document in hand that says, hey, we are here to pick up Maria Sanchez, right? Because we have information to believe they're not of legal status and they were told to leave. A lot of these, you hear the stories of they were in some type of an immigration detainment proceeding years ago, and they were maybe told to already leave. And so now they're actually trying to track those people down, right? Or they had some type of criminal record or a warrant out, and so they're going out to these workplaces and finding people that way. So, as an employer, the agents are not allowed to go into public areas of your business without what's called a judicial warrant. Now, they may show up with something that's an administrative, warrant, which is more just an internal federal government document that says, hey, we're here to get this person, right? And that doesn't give them access to walk around your facility right now. If they were to give access, like we talked about, we haven't seen a bunch of wholesale, wide-ranging workplace raids. It's because we don't see a lot of judges saying, yeah, the federal government's not going to a judge and say, give me access to all 800 employees or 500 employees at this business, right? So they're going in maybe with a judicial warrant that says, I have allowance to come to this workplace and go get this one person or two people, or an administrative warrant. And so the employer should first know how to recognize and ask for the documents that the ICE folks show up with and where they're allowed and not allowed. Some other things employers should be doing is you need to have conversations with your management and staff. There's so many times I've heard an employee that's just, they see a badge, they're afraid, they want to comply, and sometimes they may cause more problems, for the business and the workforce than is necessary. It's kind of like that TMI, right? Like Eamon was saying, you actually didn't have to say anything, right? And it's your choice if you want to, but knowing your rights of what you're looking at, having your team trained on what to do if ICE were to show up or even call on the phone and say they want to talk to somebody, have a clear visitor policy. What does that look like, right? Like any official shows up, you should be asking for credentials, documentation, not just some fake plastic badge they bought at the dollar store, right? Like, because we have heard stories of that, of people impersonating ICE agents out there. And so asking for credentials, business cards and whatnot, and then having internally a response team, if that's one or two people or a group of people, right? Operational, HR, ownership. I would say ownership should always know if these things are happening, because ultimately they're going to be on the hook for whatever happens in their business. And so designating people that way, and then making sure you know where you're keeping your employee records, right? Where are your I-9 records? Are they filed correctly? Who has access to them? Is it in some dirty box that's in the production area and you're going to have to walk over there and take the ICE agent with you to go? So you need to have a plan and making sure all of that is available. And I would guess sort of last things is stay calm and professional. Don't get combative. I've seen too many times, you've seen the stories online where These are high charged emotional times. People start getting combative, and now everything de-escalates. I mean, it escalates into something it shouldn't have needed to, because this person, for whatever stance they have, they may hate ICE or hate the enforcement, and they start screaming and yelling. And the second you get physical, a lot of your rights start getting muddled, right? And now you're arrested and handcuffed and stuff like that. And so being respectful, professional, assertive, right? Like, no, I know my rights. You can be here, but, keeping, not yelling and screaming, because then now things just start getting very crazy. And then making sure you have access to legal counsel for your business, that, an Amen can consult with businesses, others on these types of situations, but knowing what that stuff looks like, and not asking questions of your workforce either, right? That's not your job to go out and enforce these immigration laws. You should not be going out and, creating problems for yourself. If one worker, let's say ICE did show up, and now all of a sudden you go, well, how many of the rest of you are illegal, right? And you start asking those, like, don't start doing that either, because that's going to also create a whole host of issues for yourself. And lastly, I'll say make sure you're documenting what occurred, because likely this will lead to some sort of proceeding later that your business can be implicated on. So making sure you're documenting who the agents are, their badge numbers, dates and times, what was occurred, what did you give over for documentation, what did they request. If they request something, they should always give you something in writing, be it an email, be it a form letter from the government. I consult all the time with employers on this, is just because they said verbally give it to me, say put it in writing, because I want to make sure I specifically respond to what you're asking for. Yep. Too many times I've seen employers go off what was verbally said, and either they don't give enough or they give too much, and then now it causes problems down the road.
100%. And I mean, maybe it might be time for an ICE audit or a internal audit, in case you do have, old I-9 forms that you've had forever, and these employees no longer exist. You are setting yourself for potentially fines or other problems by having these I-9 forms that might be filled out incorrectly for an employee that left years ago. So you need to make sure that under the I-9 rules, you are getting rid of the ones that you don't need to have, that the ones that you do have are filled out correctly. So essentially it's an I-9 self audit to make sure that you are doing what you need to do with your paperwork, to make sure that you're covered as well as you can. Obviously you're not a documents expert. You fill out the I-9 for the best of your ability. And if something did happen, you're covered by having your I-9s and having everything filled out as it needed to be. So,
for a shameless plug, there's some attorneys that can do that. WAFLA, we provide that as a service to members of ours, and we've actually had some take advantage of that, and we've helped them identify some things. And it's easier, if we can identify it and pick it off, we can then give you a plan to clean it up and correct it. And it's not that we're hiding stuff, but you are allowed under the laws to do some self-auditing and correction and fixing things, right? So yeah, great tip on that, Eamon. Yeah,
well, that leads right into, y'all are doing beautifully as far as leading into the next area. Can you walk us through what are some of the services or resources or tools for both the farm owner, HR department, the farm operator, as well as for farm workers and farm laborers, the employee side? Obviously, yes, WAFLA. Are there some, legal services? What legal services might be available out there, et cetera? Kind of walk us through a little bit of what are some of the available services or tools that individuals have at their fingertips and their disposal.
I guess I'll start. So I'm an immigration attorney in Pasco. I do a lot of employment-based immigration, a lot of professional work visas, H-1Bs, TNs for people from Mexico and Canada, and then green card processes. So people have been here or they want to come here and want to be sponsored by their employers. We do these green card processes called a PERM or labor certification. We also do a lot of work for people doing family-based immigration processes. Came here without status, married a U.S. citizen, can apply for a green card based on that. So it's kind of a all around. We also do some I-9 audits, things like that. Any H-2As we send to WAFLA. They are the only show in town that you want to deal with. Obviously, there's a lot of immigration attorneys, and you got to make sure that you have an immigration attorney that you can trust. There's a big hubbub the last couple of days about an immigration attorney, the Abogada de las Milagros, that her tagline was arreglar sin salir. And a lot of clients have been coming to me asking if there's anything that they can do now, because they, really wanted to hear that they could get legal status. They filed applications and they did not qualify for those applications. So we're trying to sort out a lot of that. So if you do find an attorney, vet them, talk to them, figure out if they're legitimate, how long have they been around, does it sound too good to be true? If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Don't spend a bunch of money doing something that might be great in the front end. Oh, I got a work permit. But guess what? Now I'm in the deportation process.
Right.
It's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah, if somebody tells you they can help you become a U.S. citizen in 3 to 4 years, they're probably not. With our immigration system, it's probably not truthful. I mean, that's like the lucky ones, right? And I mean, if they were to promise you in 3 to 4 years or 2 years, you must know the president of the United States, because
you must be married to the president of the United States.
Right. It probably is not happening. Right. You heard the story of the guy waiting 21 years because of the way our system is built. And so, again, for your workers, for even I've had some employers taken by immigration attorneys where they've tried to help a worker get status and stuff like that, or work through a green card. And, even that, we do some filing of green cards. And I mean, it's easy, a 4 to 6 year window of time, even just for that. Right. And we've had some attorneys probably, I can turn that around in a year or 2 years. I mean, miracle worker if they can, but just it's not based in reality.
Yeah. Now I know we have a one individual, Alma Jones. She asked about employers that are within a 50-mile radius of the U.S.-Canada border. Does ICE still need to provide a warrant? Eamon, I'll turn it over to you.
Kind of a gray area. I mean, ICE typically operates within 100 miles of the border. There's a lowered expectation of privacy within 100 miles of the border, but you are still a private employer. Do you have a fence around your location? Do you have signs saying, please report to the front office before entering, things like that. So they might need to. It depends. Is the person running? If the person's running, then they're in hot pursuit and they don't need a warrant to go anywhere. They're following the person that's running. So, a lot of ifs, ands, and buts there, but there is a lowered expectation of privacy within 100 miles of the border, and actually within any international border, which could be, SeaTac Airport is, an international border, port of entry. So, draw 100 miles around that, draw 100 miles around Portland International Airport. So, it gets kind of questionable, but obviously I think you need to act as if you're trying to protect yourself and your workforce.
Right.
Ask for a warrant. Treat it like you're in the middle of nowhere, 100 miles away from everything. Yeah. And then if they aren't following the law, document that, right, and then go after them later when this case goes to court or what have you.
No, that's good. I appreciate that response. And thank you, Alma, for asking. I do want to say, just kind of as we got about 60 seconds left or so, what is it maybe that gives you hope right now in this situation? What is the kind of the message that you might leave to individuals who are watching this right now, as we're kind of looking to, one, protect farms, save family farms, provide and protect the employees that are doing the work on these farms, and what might you leave with? Enrique, I'll start with you, and then Eamon, I'll go to you next.
I would say for me, we still have a lot of people in the United States that vote and put people into elected positions that I would say are in the middle, right? A majority of where they're not super liberal, super conservative, but they kind of bounce back and forth between these value sets, right? And I think a lot of the people that I talk to sort of, their characteristics, their beliefs are sort of in that middle, right? The problem I see that's happening with us as a country right now, particularly on this topic of immigration reform, is, and it's been for some decades now, is this polarization of the loudest voices and the people that are creating the actual laws and the bills or that have the power, right? It's this 2 to 3% on either side that are really causing problems for the rest of us that sort of are trying to, help the United States progress as a larger population. So my hope is that I do know, me personally, of a lot of people in my circle, both in business and in personal, that sort of we believe in the middle here, right? But none of us are in office, and so we're not making change there, but we do vote and put people in office. And I think my hope is that us in the middle that maybe are quieter through our voting power, through our push on our politicians, start demanding that we need some reform and real reform, and we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We need true farm support. We can't keep putting our national food security and our local food production at risk and the farms that we have, because once they're gone, they're gone. They don't come back. Once they're pushed over, once they turn to houses, once they turn to a data center or you name it, we are now, like Eamon said, we're waiting for our fruits and vegetables to come from Central America, to come from South. We're sitting at SeaTac waiting for the airplane to bring our food. And is that really what we want to be as the United States? So again, I think my hope and where my hope lies is there are still a lot of people that believe we need this change. They're not trying to be radical and the loudmouth in the room, but they do want to see the United States prosper. But my challenge is that all of us need to do a better job speaking up with our elected officials and demanding some true change to start happening like today. So
yeah, no, that's good.
Agreed. And I mean, even the family farmer, you know who your labor is and you know what you need done. Don't be quiet. Don't be the person that's, oh, well, hopefully somebody else will speak up and, get immigration reform done. It's like H-2A is really expensive. How can we make this better? Hey, all the people that are here without status, how can we legalize them and go from there? So this patchwork of immigration laws just isn't working. And, on the one hand, Trump is saying things to, bring immigration, to the forefront. It's on everybody's mind every day. Mm-hmm. And based on that, it's, well, why do we keep talking about this? Because it's not fixed. Let's fix it and then stop talking about it. That would be, that's the goal. And in the interim, the people that are here doing the work that the U.S. citizens actually don't want to do, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they do pass their background checks and what have you, give them some sort of lawful status. Yeah. I have thousands of people that I've talked to that just want the chance and they haven't had the chance. My one guy has been waiting for 25 years. He finally got the chance. That seems ridiculous. So let's change things.
Yeah. No.
And we have seen with this administration, the Trump administration, at least on the federal department level, like the Department of Labor and others, try to work to make the H-2A program more easy because they do see, hey, this is a way to stop the illegal migratory flow of people, trying to cross the border. Our farms need these workers, seasonal threat. But we need congressional law changes to really make the overhaul changes to the program that we need. So
yeah good. No, well, I really appreciate that kind of final challenge, and I couldn't agree more that we do need to speak up. It takes normal people like each of us and everyone that's watching this, the average citizen that actually cares about where their food is coming from, and the individuals working within their community beside them, to speak up and to defend one another. And I thank you guys, both of you, for the resources that you are and that you represent with your organizations and the work that you're doing in the state. Really appreciate you both. Thank you for coming and sharing and giving us some of your perspective, some of your wisdom, and sharing with us what tools are available for individuals that are trying to navigate this current immigration enforcement that we're seeing going on throughout the country, really. So thank you both. Really do appreciate that. And Enrique, Eamon, I will say, and just as a kind of last plug, for those that are watching this, one way to speak up is that is something that Safe Family Farming is trying to do and working to do that for the farming community. So if you have any questions for us, if you would like to continue this conversation, if you would like to reach out to us, you can visit our website, safefamilyfarming.org, or send us an email at info@safefamilyfarming.org. We also send out monthly newsletters as well as kind of occasional additional newsletters and notes and emails. So feel free to use that QR code. You can sign up for our newsletter, and we would be thrilled to have you subscribe and to stay in touch. Again, please, if there are any additional questions, reach out to us. We would love to keep that conversation going. I will say that just as the last word, thank you to those that are watching, and I really appreciate you giving some time with us. And again, if Safe Family Farming can be a service to you, do not hesitate to contact us, and we'll give you the rest of your day. And thanks for watching. Take care.